Red Bull's internal investigation isn't about lap times, it's about losing Max Verstappen. Behind the controlled messaging from Bahrain, the real risk is existential. If the RB22 is not competitive under the 2026 regulations, Verstappen's performance clauses open doors. And in a season he has already criticized, preseason testing was meant to clarify the new order. Instead, it exposed contradiction. GPS data suggested Red Bull sustained energy deployment long. Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team and Scuderia Ferrari publicly elevated that prospect. That contradiction is not accidental. If Red Bull truly leads with its first in-house power unit, expectations become political weapons. If they don't, Melbourne could trigger doubt at exactly the wrong moment, with Verstappen already questioning whether this new era reflects the sport he wants to drive in. This isn't sandbagging theater, it's leverage. And the first move has already been made. The trigger wasn't a headline, it was the GPS trace. Overlay the Bahrain data, and one detail stands out. Red Bull didn't just peak higher on the straights, they sustained electrical deployment longer. Under the 2026 regulations, with power nearly split 50-50 between combustion and electric, that consistency isn't cosmetic, it's structural. Then came the amplification. George Russell publicly described Red Bull as pretty scary, suggesting a half-second to 1-second deployment advantage per lap. That is not casual praise during testing, that is narrative framing. Because in Formula One, perception shapes development direction. If rivals believe Red Bull has solved sustained energy delivery, they may overcorrect cooling, battery mapping, or harvesting strategies chasing an advantage that may not fully exist. Early regulation eras reward clarity and punish false assumptions. But here's the escalation. The louder Mercedes speaks about Red Bull's advantage, the more pressure shifts away from themselves, and Red Bull knows it, which raises the next question. Why would Red Bull's own technical director rank the team fourth if the data suggests otherwise? Because the pressure now moves inward. If the outside world is inflating Red Bull's strength, the real pressure is internal. Pierre Wache publicly ranked Red Bull fourth, behind Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. That is extreme deflection in a testing environment where most teams hedge cautiously, not dramatically. Technical directors do not undersell by 3 positions without intent. Because this isn't just about competitive secrecy, it's about managing one driver. Max Verstappen documented performance clauses. If Red Bull falls outside of the fine competitiveness window, exit pathways exist. That reality transforms every public statement into contract management. Now layer in Verstappen's open criticism of the 2026 regulations: heavier cars, greater energy management, less high-speed flow. He even compared aspects unfavorably to Formula E. That isn't frustration, it's philosophical resistance. And Christian Horner's stance is blunt: winning is what keeps him happy. Which means if Red Bull misreads Bahrain, if they are genuinely fourth, the consequences extend beyond Melbourne. This becomes a stability issue. If Red Bull's engine gamble fails, it won't just cost races, it will cost authority. For 2026, Red Bull committed fully to its first in-house power unit project. Years of recruitment battles, infrastructure investment, and political positioning led to this moment. Walking away from established manufacturers was a calculated risk designed to control their own destiny. But Bahrain exposed the tension. The GPS traces suggested smooth harvesting to deployment transitions and minimal drop-off at the end of straights, signs of strong thermal efficiency and intelligent energy mapping. That implies progress, possibly significant progress. Yet the public messaging insists they are fourth. Here's where the conflict sharpens. If Mercedes exaggerates Red Bull's strength, it reshapes expectation. If Red Bull downplays it, they protect internal leverage, especially with Verstappen. But both narratives cannot be true. Someone is shaping the battlefield early. And in a regulation reset, the first psychological victory can distort development paths for months. Which means this isn't sandbagging, it's positioning under uncertainty. If this is positioning, someone eventually gets exposed. The pattern didn't begin in Bahrain. Whispers in Barcelona suggested Red Bull hit the ground running. Then Bahrain's straight-line stability reinforced it. Then Russell amplified it. Step by step, the favorite label was constructed. But here's the uncomfortable possibility. What if Mercedes is shaping a narrative trap? If they underperform in Melbourne, Red Bull was already framed as dominant. If they outperform, it becomes a comeback story against a supposed benchmark. Either way, expectation shields them. Red Bull's internal investigation now makes sense. They are not just analyzing rivals' lap times, they're analyzing rivals' intent. Are Mercedes hiding combustion performance while emphasizing electric deployment? Are Ferrari masking long-run pace behind energy mapping experiments? Because in early regulation eras, misreading the field is fatal. Develop towards the wrong threat, and you waste months. And if Red Bull wastes months under regulations Verstappen already questions, the exposure won't be technical. It will be contractual. If Red Bull miscalculates, the cost won't be measured in tenths, it will be measured in loyalty. The 2026 regulations already sit uneasily with Max Verstappen. He has criticized the heavier cars, the energy management emphasis, and the reduced high-speed feel. His driving identity is built on instinct and mechanical connection, not lift and coast choreography. That tension is manageable only if the car wins. Christian Horner's position is clear. Performance keeps Verstappen committed, but performance must be immediate. Early regulation years define trajectories. If Melbourne reveals Red Bull genuinely trails Mercedes, Ferrari, or McLaren, the internal engine gamble loses its protective shield. And here's the subtle polarization. Some argue Verstappen should adapt, great drivers evolve. Others believe the sport risks alienating its most dominant talent by shifting too far into energy management dependency. Either way, patience is finite. If Red Bull dominates, the philosophy debate quiets. If they struggle, the regulation debate becomes personal. And once that line is crossed, recovery is political, not technical. If Melbourne confirms Red Bull's strength, the fallout spreads beyond the podium. An immediate advantage would legitimize the in-house power unit project overnight. Years of skepticism would collapse into credibility. Custom teams would reassess long-term alliances. Mercedes' historical power unit authority would weaken. Ferrari would face renewed internal scrutiny. But if Melbourne contradicts the Bahrain signals, if Red Bull truly sits fourth, the fallout turns inward. The internal investigation suddenly looks reactive, not strategic. The narrative of sustained deployment superiority dissolves, and Verstappen's measured body language in Bahrain becomes more telling in hindsight. He laughed when asked about rivals being behind, but it wasn't relaxed, it was guarded. Because this isn't just about one race result. Early regulation perception locks development direction. Investors, sponsors, engineers, they align behind momentum. If Red Bull misread the chessboard, they don't just lose time, they lose narrative control. And in Formula One, narrative control shapes stability. Melbourne won't just reveal lap time, it will reveal who controlled the narrative and who was controlled by it. If Red Bull's sustained deployment proves real, the 2026 era may begin with immediate authority. The in-house power unit gamble becomes a masterstroke. Verstappen's criticism fades into competitive focus. Mercedes' amplification strategy backfires. But if the RB22 underdelivers, the consequences escalate fast. Performance clauses stop being theoretical. Regulation skepticism stops being philosophical. The internal investigation stops being precautionary. It becomes damage control. This is the inflection point. Dominance stabilizes everything. Doubt destabilizes everything. And here's the final layer. Whoever wins Melbourne doesn't just gain points, they gain developmental gravity. Others chase, resources shift, confidence compounds. So the real question isn't who was sandbagging, it's who understood the political weight of expectation and who misjudged it. Because in 2026, survival isn't just technical, it's strategic.